Okay, kia ora everyone. We'll make a start as people get settled in. Awesome. Cool. So kia ora, I'm Ben, and I'll be chairing the session today. So we've got a range of talks about genomic data and its storage and the ethics behind it. But first up, we have Libby and Claire talking about the global genomic data standards to uphold local interests and international framework. Thank you very much.
Kia ora tātou, ko Libby Liggins aho. I'm a researcher from Biological Sciences in Waipapa Taumata Rau, and I'm really pleased to be here today to represent a whole big group of people. Claire won't be speaking with me today, but she is part of this work. There's a number of people who are involved in an initiative to evolve international genomic data standards to meet the contemporary and future needs of our genomics research community and society more generally. So I want to first outline the developments and challenges that you may or may not be familiar with that have arisen over the last few decades in terms of the management and stewarding of genomic data. I'll then introduce the role of the Genomic Standards Consortium, which is a community-driven autonomous group who has been responsible for guiding best practices in the genomics community for a couple of decades. And I'll finish with describing an opportunity that has been provided to genomics researchers, data scientists, data practitioners, data stewards, Indigenous governance and knowledge experts in New Zealand to be part of a conversation to reform and develop fit for the times genomic standards and community best practices. Okay, so we're now in our 5th decade, I think, of genetic research, meaning that we've amassed quite a resource of genetic data. And because of the genetic technologies that have come about, you can see here in the blue, what we're finding is that that genomic data resource is growing at an ever-increasing rate. As a result, you can see the exponential growth on the right here in the number of DNA sequences in public repositories. And this is over the last few decades, we've really seen that ramp up. And Leah and others have also described that already in this session today. The massive growth in the resource is happening at a time also when there's this increasing expectation in the science community for data to be open. And this is not something new to the genomics community. So historically, genomic data has been pretty open. So back in in the asterisks here, you can see in 1983, GenBank, one of the first genomic repositories, went public. The Joint Data Archiving Policy was adopted in 2011, and the FAIR Principles were published in 2016, all kind of like, I guess, coercing them along that path of open or keeping that the pathway. This means that, for instance, that in genomics there's the expectation and anticipation that all genomic data we generate should adhere to the FAIR guiding principles to ensure that it can be easily reused and repurposed. And this genomic data that's now being generated for use is more diverse and rich than ever before. So we also, as a research community, have greater capability and better analytical tools, we've heard about some today, and using this kind of data to address long-standing questions in biodiversity and evolutionary research. We're starting to apply it in biological monitoring and biological conservation, and also for commercial purposes. But there's a tension, because despite our good intentions, of course, in this open data age, what may be fair and equitable from a research community perspective can be quite different from a local or Indigenous rights perspective. These open data principles in and of themselves, of course, do not necessarily ensure fair and equitable sharing of benefits that may arise from data reuse. But this is explicitly detailed, these rights that around access and benefit sharing in the Nagoya Protocol to the Convention of Biological Diversity that pertains specifically to genetic resources, including digital sequence information, and in the CARE Indigenous Data Governance Principles. To really enact the Nagoya Protocol and support the CARE principles necessitates some kind of permissioning and tracking of genomic data use and reuse. This is not an easy feat, especially when it's not only people but machines looking to use the data, and in regions where governance is unclear. So for instance, where there's a tribal structure but also a governmental structure, or in places where there is no formal legal governance, such as the case in our high seas. All of this, the amount of data, the diversity of data, the increased demand for access, governance issues and tracking, is really stretching the current capability of our data repositories, which have their own set of challenging principles to aspire to. So as a result, there's a growing interest in establishing national and sub-national genomic data repositories that meet the needs of those data that are of the people governing those data, so local and Indigenous often. These repositories may not share data or metadata by default, providing greater control of who, human or machine, can access to genomic data. And this, of course, challenges the norm, which is the Global Genomic Consortium, the International Nucleotide Sequence Database Consortium, INSDC, where they share everything. All data can potentially be shared. So all of these points, somewhat independently and collectively, point to a requirement for maintaining the context and provenance of genomic data. So this is the information that should be held as metadata alongside genomic data. And they also signal that this metadata needs to be standard across repositories if we're to maintain interoperability going forward and the reuse value of these genomic data that are held in different repositories. So this is where the Genomic Standards Consortium comes in. So the GSC is an open membership working body that includes biologists, computer scientists, those building repositories and conducting large-scale comparative genomic analyses, and those with experience in developing community-based standards. Their mission has been to ensure genomic data is findable, accessible, interoperable among repositories and also available for reuse. To see this through, they're a truly international and diverse team wherein their success has been guaranteed through this broad networking over the last 2 decades. Their major contribution has been the development and socialising of the MIXIS standards. So this is an evolving standard that defines the minimum metadata to be held alongside genomic data. It provides checklists that are specific to different genomic data types. You can see the different acronyms here. And also packages or extensions that capture the important context and sampling event of that sample. So these fields will capture information such as where, when, and how the sample is collected, what are the pertinent variables about the host and the environment, and what are the methods used for collection, analysis, and sequencing, just for example. So these checklists and extensions evolve, and usually annually, to cater to technological developments happening in the field and novel study situations or sampling regimes. And this feedback and improvement of the standards relies on the GSC having a relationship with a large community of researchers. They themselves have expertise to engage these research communities and support them to develop their own standards. In their work, they always include repository developers so that the standards can be quickly operationalised, and the research community is then supported through the use the new standards through development of things like data validation tools, data upload events, and things like that, for example. So to do the work literally, the GSC brings relevant groups together annually in quite a small meeting, sometimes only 100 people, and it's in person. And late last year, the GSC reached out to me and the team working on the Aotearoa Genomic Data Repository, which we'll hear about next. They asked us to help host the annual meeting in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where they anticipate there will be researchers and groups with expertise in Indigenous contexts and Indigenous data governance that they can work with to help develop the standard to meet the contemporary needs of the genomics research community and our broader society. So from the 12th to the 14th of August this year, Waipapa Taumata Rau and Genomics Aotearoa will be hosting the 26th meeting of the GSC in Rotorua, where the focus will be in developing metadata standards for Indigenous and other local contexts of genomics standards, other local contexts of genomics, and this includes ethical, legal, and social metadata curation. So to give you an idea of the topics and work format, I'll go over a few highlights, depending on how I'm going for time. I'm good. Okay, so the first session will be focused on genomic standards in Indigenous contexts. We'll be hearing from those who have already implemented mechanisms that serve Indigenous interests, including metadata terms, that can help to operationalise the care and fair principles in genomics. This will be followed by some more specific use cases to showcase the value of these developments, and then a panel discussion. In general, there will be a lot of time for discussion and workshopping at the meeting. On the second day, we'll hear from the GSC and other communities they work with regarding the development of new standards over the past year, including an update on eDNA checklists, standards for ancient DNA and other things that are already ongoing. We'll then hear from the International Nucleotide Sequence Database Consortium, which includes GenBank, NCBI and others, as well as some of those independent repositories such as our own AGDR. Finishing, we will discuss how we, those repositories that are within the global consortium and those who are independent, can keep communication open and maintain standards and interoperability to enable, data sharing if appropriate. The last day we'll be covering the changing legal context of genomic research as the Biodiversity Beyond Jurisdiction Agreement came into force last month. And more countries are starting to sign the Nagoya Protocol and looking to enact benefit sharing. I've certainly been myself a signatory on several permits now where the country has ratified and signed Nagoya Protocol, and there's an expectation around benefit sharing, but how we do it is very unclear at this point. We'll be investigating the potential role of metadata standards in permissions and tracking to aid these sorts of things. And last will be a series of workshops for participants to come together to actively develop new standards informed by these discussions. So as an outcome of the meeting, we're hoping we will actually have some new standards to bring to the community, at least for discussion and potentially endorsement. So if this is at all interesting to you, or you feel you might have some expertise, some case studies, some technologies that may help serve our collective interests in this meeting, I'd really love to hear from you and welcome you to join us in Rotorua. And if your organisation is in a position to sponsor our meeting so that we can facilitate the costs of getting the right people in the room, because this is only going to be as good as the people in the room, we would be really grateful. So please come talk to me. Thanks in advance to the sponsors who have already committed. It's meant that our meeting can go forward, and the organising committee who've really helped tailor a program, I think, that's going to start us on a good course. And lastly, I just want to thank the GSE for taking on this challenge. They didn't need to, they've done a lot as a community, and now they're really stepping out of their comfort zone into an area where there's a lot of people been working already, there's a lot of traction, but it's going to be a matter of bringing those networks together with these other existing networks to really put our good minds together and all get on the same page. So hopefully this meeting in Aotearoa, New Zealand and our community can be part of that solution going forward. And that's me. Thanks, Ben.
Do you have any questions for Libby? You might be off the hook. Awesome, thank you very much. Next up, we have Mick Black and Claire this time, I think, talking about furthering Kaitiakitanga and Aotearoa Genomic Data Repository. Thank you very much.
What am I doing on here?
Sorry.
All good?
Getting my jobs.
I don't know. Let's try that one. Yeah. Yeah, that one. Cool. We'll talk about that. All right. Awesome. I won't introduce myself because I did it yesterday, and I need to make a note to stop stitching myself up by rostering myself on to give a talk after people who give awesome talks. Where'd Libby go? Thank you, Libby. That was awesome. All right. This was actually quite a difficult one because we've given regular updates on AGDR kind of every year at this conference, so anyone who's been before has probably seen a lot of the stuff, so we've sort of pulled some stuff back. So if you're thinking, wow, I don't understand any of this, there's a lovely paper you can go and read. But just give us some motivation at the start. Where we were coming from in terms of putting this repository together was thinking about the genomic data that has been generated in New Zealand in partnership with Māori. This slide's written more from a generic sort of international perspective around international communities, but acknowledging the fact that there's deep importance to Māori of those species and that they have traditional guardianship or Kaitiakitanga over those species. And so we need to think about, if we're taking that genomic data, what are we doing with it? And a lot of the time it's going into international repositories, and from an Indigenous governance perspective, there's a lot of problems with that. And so what AGDR was designed to do was to solve some of those problems around Indigenous governance of data from our non-human taonga species. Just acknowledge the team. I won't go through everyone, but we've been running for probably about 6 years now, from humble beginnings. But there've been a varied cast of characters across these years who've been involved, and I'd just like to thank everyone who's been on the team or who's currently on the team for their amazing contributions. Libby covered this, so that's great, so I don't have to cover this one. But just acknowledging that over really probably the past couple of decades that I've been involved in analysing genomic data, that we've seen this real transition through saying, yep, all the data's got to be out there, and then here's how you put all the data out there, and here's how you make sure it's all findable and reproducible. And then an acknowledgement of the importance of Indigenous perspectives around data reuse and data sharing. So starting to think more about those Indigenous perspectives and the importance of incorporating those into our decision making around data. Also just at the bottom, we've got the listen principles there that Libby highlighted as well. In Aotearoa, we have a lot of really good resources in this space. Many of these actually didn't exist when we started out developing the repository. Probably the one that was most utilised was Taumata Rau. And since then we've had a number of really nice sets of guidelines and models come out in this space. So if you're interested in this area, I'd recommend you just go and read all of them. Huge thank you to Ben Teaka, who was our first Vision Mātauranga manager for Genomics Aotearoa. Ben put together the protocols around data submission and data access for the repository, and I'll give you the quote that's often attributed to Ben, that Ben said, yeah, I may have said something like that at one stage. Once I was able to leave Aotearoa, they lose any and all protections provided by the Treaty of Waitangi. And that's a really good underpinning statement for why we need an Aotearoa-based repository for genomic data. Little diagram there out of the paper on the repository. The important thing here is, so this is just showing the process of applying for access to data in the repository. The important thing there I've highlighted is the red box. And I think the defining feature of the repository is that in order to get access to the data, you have to go through an access process, but that data request has to be approved by Kaitiaki. Okay? And so those Kaitiaki represent the iwi or hapu that were partnered with to produce that data. So if they don't give permission for you to access the data, then data access is not provided. We also have a Māori Advisory Board, which is a more recent appointment or addition to AGDR. So I won't go through everyone. They've been really incredibly engaged in helping us ensure that the operation of AGDR is tika, follows tikanga, and have been really supportive of pretty much everything that's going on in the space. So I'm just making sure that things are on track. So we meet quarterly, and from my perspective, these guys are currently advisory, but I would very much like to see them move into more of a governance role. And so if we're thinking about Māori data sovereignty, one of the sort of the catchphrases is Māori data in Māori hands. And at the moment it's not. It's actually in the hands of those who control the servers and provide access. That's all informed by Māori, but at the moment there's, the governance structure isn't such that it really satisfies that condition. So that's sort of an aspirational place we'd like to go. Speaking of our advisory board, this was a very cool innovation that we've just got in place, the concept of whangai. So traditionally for Māori, this is the situation where a child is raised by their non-birth parents. So for data sets, and it was a wonderful discussion with our advisory board about how this works. For data sets, this would be a situation where for some iwi or hapu, they don't have the resources or the capacity for dealing with access requests to data, and so there's the possibility of, with their agreement, another iwi or hapu taking on, in a temporary way, that Kaitiakitanga role. So we've had one instance of this already, and it's working really well. And so we're constantly looking for ways that we can help our Kaitiaki fulfill those responsibilities in a way that works for them. Another exciting innovation, I think last year at this conference we announced that we'd just become a local context integration partner, which means we can display the bicultural labels and notices, which was very exciting. We haven't quite pulled this off yet because I haven't signed the piece of paper that pays the money, but we're also going to make Genomics Aotearoa a subscriber, and so what that means is that our researchers can create notices associated with those data sets. And so I will encourage all of you, because we don't have enough capacity within GA to be able to cover all of the notice requirements for the country, I'd encourage all of you to think about whether your institutions, or whether you can convince your institutions to become subscribers. It's not particularly expensive, which would allow researchers working with Māori and generating genomic data to generate appropriate notices associated with those data sets. Just a really quick example. So if you go in here and you search for swamp Māori, you will find it. If you click on it, it pops up our page at the very bottom there. You can see there's a biocultural notice associated with that data set. If you click on the link just above, you shoot through to the local context hub, and you've got all the information about that particular notice there. This is one from Rangatani o Manawatu. And I think at that point, I hope I've not gone over time, and I get to hand over to Claire.
Ngā mihi nui. Kia ora koutou, ko Claire Rai tōku inga. So I'm going to finish off the presentation by sort of talking a little bit around the technical developments that have happened over the last 12 months and how we're sort of enabling that continuation of Kaitiakitanga through the system. So in that vein, I figured I'd show an architecture diagram. This is obviously a very high level one, but really one of the I guess prototype still aspects, but that had made it through production for the last 4 or 5 or 6 years, was really the way we dealt with the access mechanisms from our working with the Kaitiaki and getting that approval. So it was really all done with kind of a Google form and then emails back and forth, and kept track of fairly manually. And so the aim was really to replace this with a single system and simplify that both from the Kaitiaki's perspective in terms of having one place to go and being able to see what the status of any data sets they had that Kaitiakitanga for, but also from kind of our internal perspective of being able to have sort of an overview of where everything was at in kind of one place and not having to kind of chase through emails and things. So we've implemented a system called REANNZ, which is the Resource and Title Management System. This is open source software developed by the AI Elixir node in Finland, CSE Finland, who are also a cool group to work with. So we've had conversations with them where things haven't fitted. But essentially this provides us, as I say, like a single portal from the Kaitiaki perspective, and also the interaction with our team, as well as then the researchers can sort of log in and see where their application is, how it's progressed, add additional information if that's required. And we've used this in a previous project, so we were fairly confident of being able to kind of implement it and tweak it as we needed to. So if we go to, we nearly did a demo, but sorry, we've just got screenshots. In the end, I got a bit nervous. It's not quite in production. So essentially, you'll go to the portal as usual. You'll click on the Apply for Access button as usual, but instead of being taken to a Google form, you'll be taken to a login screen. You'll log in, and then it will use those credentials to start your application form, and you can then apply to access that data set. There's a few really cool features here. Essentially, you sign the terms and conditions up front, and that's all done up front. We've had in kind of our current mechanism, we get right to the end of the process, data access has been approved from the Kaitiaki perspective, and then the researchers come back and look at the terms, and I don't want to agree to that. So having this up front, it doesn't waste anyone's time. We've also can have bespoke questions. So each data set, if there's unique context that needs to be given, we work with Kaitiaki to understand those questions, and we can add that in from the start in that application form, and so that can be different for different data sets. So essentially, as a researcher, you fill this in and you send off the application, and then you're notified as the process goes on. From the Kaitiaki perspective, it looks fairly similar, but you get a few different dashboards. But essentially, you come in and you can review the application, and you can, if it's looking great, you can approve the access straight away. You can do a whole lot of other things in terms of requiring extra information and going back to it, or actually bringing in someone else to consult on the application if there's any questions around different aspects of the science, perhaps, or whether they actually need this data for this experiment. We're also going to use this for the submission into the data set, or into the repository, sorry. So currently we have, again, a Google form, and this will replace this in order to just, again, track all the data that comes into the repository and just check that there's appropriate kaitiaki already in place, or then work with the researchers where there's not. Now, I think the system was designed really for a sort of a one-to-one model of you've got one data set and you've got one kaitiaki, or I guess a data access committee, or however you're doing your consent management. And so we've been working with the REANNZ team because we have interesting messes where it's not really that one-to-one ratio. So in some circumstances you can have multiple kaitiaki over a single data set. I mean, understandably, I think especially in a ecological setting, sort of boundaries, as animals, fish don't really understand what boundaries look like. So in terms of how those data sets are managed, we need to have a lot more nuance in options for what that might look like. And I think it would obviously need to be agreed up front if all kaitiaki need to actually approve, if there's some capacity, if one kaitiaki denies, does that mean everything's denied? And having those mechanisms obviously agreed up front, but also having a system that allows those different workflows to actually happen in order to get through. So these are some of the fun discussions we're having with the REANNZ team at the moment, and working to hopefully collaborate in order to get those additions in. So I guess just to conclude, I think certainly my learning on this project has really been around Kaitiakitanga being a journey. It's what we do now is on the way, and really trying to work to improve and further enable Kaitiakitanga for these data, and that also there's needs for different communities. It may look different depending on the data, depending on the context of how that needs to work. So I guess if I've been brave enough to show the real system, we should have about 90 data sets that will be accessed through this mechanism in a couple of weeks, probably. And then we'll be onboarding our kaitiaki and getting feedback and tweaking based on that. And yeah, as I said, working with the REANNZ team for those additional use cases. So questions, and a big thank you. I think we've mostly updated the logos, but awesome.
Here as well, and do questions. Is there any questions for Claire?
Awesome as always, and I've heard lots of mention of REANNZ, and now I actually know what that's talking about, so thank you for sharing the update. It's useful. Does that mean it's another set of credentials for everyone, or is it tapping into some kind of
Yeah, great question. So we're gonna see how we go. Essentially, you don't log into any other part of the system as an external user. So we're less worried at the moment about the fact that the internal team have to manage multiple credentials, but externally you will be able to log in, and because you only log into the one system, it will use one set of credentials. We're not using Tuakiri currently because most of our kaitiaki don't have an institutional organisation, and so that's something probably we will look at, because obviously most of our researchers will, and that will probably be easier. But we can, with KeyCloak, register, and you can use your institutional credentials. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, that's very interesting, and thank you for showing REANNZ. Is REANNZ integrated with a typical security group system that you find with Microsoft, Entra, and that, these kind of things?
So I think you have to set that up. Unfortunately, Jun's in the room as well. I think you have to set it up separately. So we used KeyCloak to be that integration partner, didn't we? Like to do that.
Yeah, we did some integration with KeyCloak, which handles integration with other things. So REANNZ directly itself, I don't think does that.
Yeah, I don't think
But
it's.
it
Yep.
should be doable through other tools such as KeyCloak, which handles Tokyo integration and federation.
My follow-up question was, some of the
Yeah, so actual full-on data federation is another tangent that we're working on for exactly that. So as Mick said, to further extend that Maori data in Maori hands.
I was just saying, I don't know if you talked yesterday. I talked about our Indigenous Genomics platform part 2. So some of the discussions we're having at the moment with iwi partners are exactly around that. It's about can they host their own data on the systems, can it be federated? So I'm really excited about that because we've been talking about it for a while and now we're actually able to put that into practice with some projects. So that'd be really cool.
I've got some general questions. So you put your terms of use up at the beginning. Is that a generic terms of use, or can Kaitiaki create that for themselves?
Yeah, great question. So we have a standard set that is by default if the Kaitiaki don't want bespoke ones, but we absolutely also do have the bespoke ones, yeah. Absolutely.
And then are Kaitiaki actually trained to understand the application process? Like I can imagine scientists want to put in a bunch of words for their projects or why they want to access this Tauma data, but I also work with my partners who are nowhere near that end of the spectrum of understanding.
We are in the process of doing that. So yeah, it was very much a best efforts that, to get everything up and running. But now we are realising, and as we just start to deal with more and more people, there was starting to realise that we need to actually standardise that and sort of onboard people. And I think particularly with the introduction of REANNZ, then we're actually going to have to do some onboarding there. But you guys have done that with Rakiora already, right? You've already been through that process of doing onboarding, at least with REANNZ. So we've got an example where it's worked successfully before. Once.
Small scale.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we have a lot of people who are at different ends of the
Yeah.
spectrum in terms of reading just research and understanding what research is.
Yeah.
Can I comment on that and be annoying?
No, we're out of time, aren't we?
I get what you're saying, and I agree with a lot of it. I also think it is beholden on us as scientists to start learning how to explain so that people are appropriately informed and can make those informed decisions. It goes both ways. It's not just like, we have to train the Kaitiaki up to speak our language.
I'll just finish off with a comment. I'm hoping that this is sort of how we've worked with GA for the whole of GA 1.0 is we've tried to do exemplars because we don't have enough money to fund everything. So what I'm hoping is that those IGP projects that are involving data sets in Kaitiaki and AGDR, that they can serve as exemplars. So then there'll be inter-iwi communication about, our data sitting in AGDR, here's how we do things. Because we're not going to be able to go and talk to everyone in the country who wants to put data there. So I think the scientists will need to have the conversations, I think iwi will need to have conversations. And hopefully we can put together some really strong exemplars to show that this is a good model and that people will want to use it. Because there's no compelling people to use it. It's a resource that's there if it's useful that people want to use. So we need to make it useful. Oh, do you want to wrap it up, Ben?
I have a hypothetical question which may or may not be similar to something that's happened in real life. Say you have data sets that have been uploaded many years ago onto NCBI, they're in the sequencing archive, and now you're thinking they probably should have not been made publicly available though, should be on AGDR. Do you have any sort of pathway to help move data sets from like a very public repository to AGDR and also helping the researchers find Kaitiaki for those data sets, which should have already happened, but it hasn't, so how can we make things right?
We do have an example of that where it's happened. I don't know that we'd ever try to remove something from NCBI. That could be quite tricky. And even if you did, the data's still out there, right? But so there is an example. There is a MOA data set that was made available on NCBI years ago, and the researcher involved actually did get in touch, and so that data has been repatriated, even though it's still available through NCBI, and sits within AGDR. Unfortunately, you raised the problem of Kaitiaki, and so one of the really important things there is, where did the samples come from? And actually, there's not really good provenance on the samples, and at the moment, it's probably somewhere in the South Island. So it does narrow it down, but it certainly doesn't give us an answer in terms of, who holds Kaitiakitanga over this. So there are actually still discussions going on about that. So, but that's, that is a situation where that sort of repatriation has happened. Yes, you can still get the data from NCBI, but actually, if you wanted to do things properly, you would go through HDR, put in an application. At the moment, unfortunately, it would stall because we haven't resolved that Kaitiaki issue. I see a hand up, Ben, but I think we better knock it on the head. I'm happy to talk afterwards.
We're running out of time, unfortunately,
Yeah.
so afternoon tea for everything. Awesome. In our last slot today, we do not have Nick Jones. We have 3 people. We've got Francois, Jamie, and Michael.
What are we doing here?
Oh, sorry.
Do we have to like? All right. This one?
Yeah, this one.
Hi, friends. We're a late addition to the program today. So this time last year, we were on the cusp of releasing our Research Compute Hub, which is our cluster, our new cluster. At that time, we thought we'd be ready, and we weren't. We actually launched later in April. It's been like 10 months now. So the baby's almost 1, and we just thought we'd share some unserious version of our story of what the last year has been like. And look, I should just say that, oh, can I do this? I always love using clickers. We've had some help. We've had some help from Copilot, and I've kept the extra tea just for fun. Okay, so I'm just here as an unreliable narrator. We've got Dr. Francois Bisset, he's our scholar monk. Doesn't he look like he could be a scholar monk? And our principal eResearch consultant, Dr. Michael Coe. He's our wandering minstrel, singing songs and spinning tales to spread the word of the hub across our university. And look, it's been a big year for us. Since we last presented, we've implemented the hub, we decommissioned the old cluster, we've transitioned all of our researchers from the old cluster to the new. And we're not going to bore you with the how we got to that point, because that would be a rehash. So we just thought we'd start it post go live, and if you want to talk about, how we got to the starting line, come and have a chat to us at afternoon tea. Like all good crusades, there have been highlights and challenges which we'll share with you today. And I will hand over to Francois.
Oh, yes. So yes, I was one of the person involved in getting that up. So no, I have a little bit of blank. So the idea was to get what we were sold was a flexible environment where we could do many things, supported by a HPC cluster underneath. So we have traditional HPC, but on top we have on-demand, and we have capacity, should I say, to do some other things. So that's the boring hardware with a few of these things that we have. And that's the general structure. So we have some shared storage, like in all good clusters. Actually, we have 2 kinds. We have the kind for the HPC, and we have a kind for OpenStack, because our cluster is built on top of OpenStack. It was too small to be bare metal, so everything is virtual. On top of those virtual, on the OpenStack, we have a cluster generated using Slurm. We have Kubernetes, or at least we'll be able to use Kubernetes one day when we figure out how to use it. We technically can do VM, but we don't have capacity right now on various kind of containers. Oh, I'm not speaking in the mic. Like all those kind of projects, it comes to life on the, it was all nice, but there's a few growing pains and kinks. So since then we had to figure out, oh, this knob needs adjusting. The slump configuration didn't end up being quite right. We are still adjusting, actually. We'll talk about it later. Some software was not working as we wanted. And, well, we had the base software installed by the vendor, and we had many software to install. That was long, painful, and still going on. I think that's... Yeah, I think that covers it. I think it's time for Michael to enter the scene.
Hi, I'm Michael. I go out to all the departments and do one-on-one consultations to spread the word about the RCH. All right. And so basically, as an induction, we talk about how to access the RCH through our ServiceNow system, which is a pain in and of itself. We go over the Open On-Demand portal and SSH, and we go over how to write a Slurm script, because that's kind of difficult. What do each of the headers in a Slurm script mean, and sort of what pitfalls people might see when they log onto the RCH. So speaking of Open On-Demand, great. Does anybody here have experience with Open On-Demand? Right, so for those of you who are not in the cult yet, Open On-Demand is an awesome tool for people that may be intimidated by the command line or the terminal, but they can still run programs on the HPC. So here's a picture of our on-demand dashboard. And you can see that we have sort of the regular apps that people might use, like Jupyter Hub, RStudio, Visual Studio Code is popular, MATLAB. But you can also host your own apps, like our very popular transcription service, which is in blue up there. But for things that don't have a nice web app, you can have a desktop. So we have a virtual Linux desktop, I believe it's Mate. And here's an image of it. It's within an Apptainer. So it's a desktop running in a container, running on a virtual machine. Yeah, we've got layers of virtualization here. But the benefit here is that you can have a terminal and you can load all the programs, all the modules in the backend. And to show you, here I've started a program called Agisoft Metashape, which is a very popular photogrammetry program. Wow, that's a hard word to say. And so you need a GUI because you're working with photos, right? Sorry, a graphic user interface because you're working with photos. And so to quote our very power user of Agisoft Metashape, thanks for the GPUs. Sorry, it's stuck on the thing. There we go. Here's a typical day of usage on the RCH for the colorblind. That's why the colors are that way, just in case.
That was last week.
Yeah. So the yellow is the usage, and then the blue is what's available. The top is CPUs, and the bottom is memory. But lo, some of our users use up all the CPUs. They don't like to play nice. So we've had to implement sort of restrictions on our medium and long partitions. And to do that, we use Slurm QoS, which is quality of service. Really useful, wonderful thing. You can do it like while the thing's running. It doesn't take anything offline. And we also have a co-investment model where we have departments invest in nodes, but to give them sort of a carrot, we give them priority queuing. So we do a QoS for that as well. As you can see with our Gravity QoS down there, that's our maths and stats and physics. They have a higher priority, but only up to a certain amount of CPUs. And then, because a lot of people were also using our GPUs, we used Slurm's built-in shard system for our L40Ss, and NVIDIA's MIG, which is what is it? Man, I knew this. I don't know. It partitions the GPUs into different instances, multi-instance, yeah. And so you can see the structure there.
I'll come talk about wish I could sashay on with my tiara, but I forgot it. I didn't pack it. So Michael touched on the co-investment model. We started talking... Oh, did it stop working? Is it back? Must be my magic. So we started talking to the science and engineering department about working with us to continue building on the RCH. So we you know, with the carrot of preferential nodes and additional training and support, it was really great that we had them join us really quickly, actually, before we before we implemented and went live. We already had a punter transferring precious budget from their department into ours, and with the trust that we would build it with them and support them and train them, and then they wouldn't have to feed and water it because we would. And that was really fantastic, and it's a modest investment for them. It's low risk, and they don't actually have to technically support it themselves, which was really fantastic. And it's actually allowed us, the first one, to create a repeatable and transparent process for future co-investment opportunities. So we're now we're building one additional node for School of Biological Sciences. We're working with our math and stats guys to now bring in a cluster that they have already built out themselves, but now to add it to this RCH. A couple of snags there, like some of you might be aware that the costs of hardware is growing much higher than anticipated, so we're really just navigating that alongside our colleagues. But everyone's really interested in working with us, which has been traditionally a fraught area. So we're really fortunate that they've put their trust in us. We're open and honest about what we can and can't achieve. I have a new expanded role, which I now will be supporting faculties to help plan their hardware and software budgets. No doubt we'll have lots of discussion about, you know, do you need new nodes? Do you need more compute resources? What about clubbing in with us so we can do it together? Because ultimately, you know, sharing resources requires that coordination, visibility, because we often don't know, policy decision-making and facilitation. So I'm going into the breach to try and facilitate that amongst departments because they don't talk to each other, even though they're in the same faculty. And I'm working really closely with the faculty operations director to do that because they have a really good budget view. Budget literacy is something, is that 5 minutes or 2? Okay. Budget literacy is something that I really want to focus on, together with data visibility and showback, which we talked about yesterday at the showback, at the Who Pays Birds of a Feather. What's been really awesome is, I forgot to tell the vendor partners to come and join us for this chat, is that our vendor partners, Sempre and Dell, tell us when our department friends reach out to them to say, hey, how much is this computer? And they're like, hey, why don't you talk to Francois and Jamie about buying with us? And so they've actually helped us facilitate a conversation when they didn't really need to do that, and it was just, they just know that that is what we want to try and achieve. So it was really cool that they were able to connect with us. So in terms of value for money, that's where we're going. And what's our next slide? So it's just to recap, it's been a great year. We've had some challenges, but nothing we couldn't overcome with our friends. People are really willing to engage with the process. It's early days. It's definitely a tree that is growing. This is probably a more mature tree than Copilot generated for me, but it looks really pretty. So we're keen to watch it grow, and we'll share what we can over the next few years, probably maybe a lightning talk next time. And yeah, just big thank you to our partners, thank you to our colleagues at UC, and thanks to our friends at eResearch, because we learn from you guys and we really do take it back and apply it to how we do things at home. Thanks.
Do we have any questions?
Or is it time for coffee? George?
That is a next level set of slides.
She had a lot of fun doing them.
Yeah,
and
you
beyond quite
mentioned
a
that
lot.
there was something grand coming. Quite comprehend. I'm really interested in your
discussion with the stakeholder about what was a reasonable time, like you said, before starting. There was discussion. Maybe we should only run short job on there that's up to 6 hours.
Yeah.
On you get. So after 6 hours,
You'll make it.
we had those discussions. We have not had to enforce them yet, but that may be coming.
And that's because it's part of the broader cluster, it's not
Yeah.
a partition as such, it's a purely.
While they both sit, they haven't really come yet to on a big job.
There have been times where people are using all of their partition, and then we just have them queue with the normal partition. And they've seemed pretty happy so far.
It's better than not having access to private.
Yeah, they're not only limited to their QoS, they can use the other QoS.
Yeah. Of course. If they want to have stuff we have agreed they have priority to, they use the QoS.
Yes.
Thank you. That's very interesting model. I was wondering about the engagement with the scientists or the users. I heard there's discussions at the faculty level and ad hoc discussions with people complaining or being happy. Do you plan to be more systematic? Do you plan to have a way to bring the information up to you to assess future needs? It's something that's in the pipeline. And related to that, do you have a kind of a transparency model of usage to show who are the big users and less big users, or is it still sensitive?
I think there are two questions there. So one is, hopefully this is right, that you're asking about, how are we promoting this to our users and making sure that they get access. Michael's doing a fabulous job. At the moment, we are going in a very lo-fi engagement people model while we are growing. There's only 3 of us in this team. So that's what's working for us right now. We'd love for it to be more systematic, but we don't really have the resources to fully do that yet. And we're getting to know the players and our researchers in this space. In terms of your other question, we do have a showback model. That was a recent report that's been provided to us. We don't quite have the sign-off. Well, I have sign-off to just publish it, and so everyone will know at a granular level how much dollar cost, how much it costs to run that job for a particular person. But whether or not we should do that, I think, is the bigger question, and that's not something that we've, totally understood yet. And so I'm really loath to just publish it and figure it out afterwards. I'd rather engage with our stakeholders first, tell them about this big change, and then make a call on whether we anonymize or roll it up to departments. But I do think that it's important that people know the real cost of running such a valuable resource, and that might help them not hoard the gold so much. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Yes.
Please don't tell me how much I'm using. But another thing, so one thing that is starting to become quite common, I found in the literature with HPC usage is like pollution, like how much CO2 the analysis is worth. So rather than a financial, this is how much you're using, it could be this is how much you're killing the planet.
Yes, thank you very much, because that did come up with Michael. Michael asked me how much time I was going to spend on Copilot making this particular pack. But no, thank you. That's a really good piece of feedback. We'd love to build that into our reporting, but we would need to work with our partners to understand that consumption. We're not quite there yet. We're still growing.
I think we have some of the tools, but yes, we will need to read.
Yes.
Would an interim step with the showback be to email the individuals with their own consumption, or maybe their proportion of the total, rather than putting the list on, nailing up the list on the tea room wall?
You weren't sitting next to me in the last couple of sessions because I was just writing the email, the automated email to send to the user with by the way, here is your report and this is how much it costs to run this for you. Please remember to link us in your acknowledgements and DOI, etc., etc. But yes, absolutely, that is something that we want to do and roll that up to the grant level and department level and eventually faculty level.
Technically, that's something they can find out themselves, but it's a matter when we do those reports, putting it in front of them rather than them having to know how to do it.
And like this gentleman over here, they don't really want to know, so they're not going to look for it.
They have access to their own data if they want to.
But over time, if they get some, how send them over time, then they're going to help me.
We hope so.
Like a lot of you, so what we
So we just send them some trees, just like this is how many trees you've used.
How many trees you need to plant?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thumbs down.
In bright red, bright red.
Right, yes.
Yes.
What is the threshold until which you are looking at providing capacity before the researcher should move to a tier 0 facility like REANNZ? Is there a threshold that you're looking at not going over in terms of building the HPC capabilities at the university? Or
Really great question. Really great question. I think because they generally consult with Francois and Michael first before we add the job to the RCH. But I also have a fund for our researchers that don't have the merit queue or a grant level queue to use the REANNZ resources, the HPC resources there. So we have both options available to them that is at no cost to them at this stage. But yeah, it just a conversation, an estimation of the work involved before we make a call on what they should do.
Yeah. I guess we'll see when we have that problem. They really are a problem for our cluster. And we also have that conversation with Ryan, how much will it cost? And that's still undecided completely. We know that new pricing is coming.
I'm really scared of that new pricing, George. Just saying.
I'll just add that whenever I consult with somebody, I always try to offload them onto REANNZ.
No.
When I can. Depending on the job. So sometimes they just don't have a big job. So
yeah. But we know that we have big customers that use our cluster, so they also use REANNZ, but they use our cluster because they want to prepare stuff, or they don't want to pay so much this month.